A very good morning. Just past 8 by the clock. We are back again with another edition of Breakfast News. Over the next 60 minutes is your power-packed comprehensive news coverage across all sections of news, right from politics, business, sports, entertainment. We'll get you the latest, cutting all the noise, bringing you news as it happens, as you sip your morning tea and coffee. I'm Anil Thomas. Let's get started this Friday morning with the top stories. India accuses China of politicizing the Winter Olympics by making a Galwan soldier torchbearer. Announces India's envoy will not participate in the opening and closing ceremonies of the Beijing Winter Olympics. India's public service broadcaster sports channel DD Sports will not telecast the live opening and closing ceremony of the Games. Political activity intensifies as assembly election dates close in. Prime Minister Narendra Modi to virtually address voters in Uttar Pradesh. Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath will file his nomination papers today in the presence of Amit Shah. Congress leader Rahul Gandhi is scheduled to visit Goa. Further discussion on President's address today in both houses of Parliament. Upper House to witness 0 hour and question hour 2. Several private members' legislative bills listed for today in both houses. COVID-19 cases sustain a declining trend. Health Ministry confirms that surgery is safe even on those COVID infected. Schools fully open in 11 states, partially opened in 16 states, closed in 9. Education Ministry issues guidelines, SOPs for the reopening of schools. And top ISIS leader Qureshi kills himself as US forces close in on him in northwestern Syria. President Joe Biden informs Qureshi blew himself and family members. And US accuses Moscow of a plot to fabricate an attack by Ukrainian forces. Officials say Russia could use it as a pretext to take military action against its neighbor. The leaders of France and Turkey attempt to mediate in Ukraine crisis. Erdogan offers to host a meeting with the leaders of Russia and Ukraine to mediate the crisis. But those were the top stories. Starting first up now with the stories in detail, with India accusing China of politicizing the Winter Olympics after China picked a PLA soldier who was injured in the Galwan Valley border skirmish with India as a torchbearer during the torch relay for the Winter Olympic Games. Sending a stern message, India's envoy will not participate in the Beijing Winter Olympics. Meanwhile, an article in an Australian newspaper has reported that China's losses in 2020 Galwan Valley border clash was much higher than reported. The report said the hand-to-hand battles sent global leaders into high alert and drew the Quad closer together. Here's our report.
China's claims of just 4 casualties in the Galwan clash in 2020 stand exposed yet again. An investigative report by an Australian newspaper establishes that at least 38 Chinese troops drowned during the clash in June 2020. In February 2021, China admitted 4 PLA soldiers had died in this face-off. And after China picked a PLA soldier who was injured in the Galwan Valley border skirmish with India as a torchbearer during the torch relay for the Winter Olympics, India accused China of politicizing the Winter Olympics.
The Chinese side has chosen to politicize an event like the Olympics. I wish to inform that our charge d'affaires of the Embassy of India in Beijing will not be attending the opening or the closing ceremony of the Beijing 22 Winter Olympics.
Prasar Bharati CEO Shashi Shekhar Vempati in a tweet said that consequent to the announcement by MEA, DD Sports Channel will not telecast live the opening and closing ceremonies of the Winter Olympics being held in Beijing. The report in the Australian newspaper The Klaxon reads, China's losses in the high-altitude 2020 Galwan Valley border clash with India, the deadliest confrontation between the two giants in over 4 decades, were much higher than reported, with many soldiers drowning while crossing a fast-flowing sub-zero river In darkness, new research claims. Evidence provided by the group of social media researchers, which the klaxon has independently built on, appears to support claims that China's casualties extended well beyond the 4 soldiers named by Beijing. It also shows extreme lengths Beijing has gone in order to silence discussion about the battle. In particular, discussion about the true number of Chinese casualties. A report into the matter titled Galwan Decoded has been prepared by a group of social media researchers. Citing several Weibo users, the report states, at least 38 PLA troops, along with Wang, were washed away and drowned that night, of which only Wang was declared among the 4 officially dead soldiers. Klaxon report draws heavily on research conducted by a group of social media researchers, whose sources include Chinese bloggers, information obtained from mainland-based Chinese citizens, and media reports that have since been deleted by Chinese authorities. In June 2020, a report by the Russian news agency TASS had said that 45 Chinese soldiers had died in the Galwan clash. India, as well as several other nations, have in some way boycotted the Beijing Olympics because of China's expansionist designs, as well as its attempt to politicize the Olympic Games. China clearly stands isolated today.
Well, ahead of the Uttar Pradesh Assembly elections, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will hold a virtual rally in 5 districts of the state today. Prime Minister Modi will be campaigning in districts including Aligarh, Noida, Meerut, Ghaziabad and Hapur, which will cover 23 assembly constituencies in Uttar Pradesh. With the Election Commission relaxing norms of physical public meetings for all phases, BJP is expecting in-person participation of over 1 lakh people across these locations. Earlier on Jan 31st, Prime Minister Modi launched the party's campaign in Uttar Pradesh by holding a virtual rally for 5 districts that are going to polls in the first and second phase of assembly elections. Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath will file his nomination papers today for the Gorakhpur urban seat. Union Home Minister Amit Shah will remain present for CM Adityanath's nomination. This is the first time Yogi Adityanath, a 5-time former Lok Sabha MP, is contesting a state assembly elections as a candidate. Amit Shah had earlier declared Yogi Adityanath the party's chief ministerial face. Meanwhile, today is the last day of withdrawal of candidature nomination for Phase 3 of Uttar Pradesh Assembly elections. Besides, scrutiny of candidature nominations for Phase 4 will also be held today. The Election Commission of India will issue the Gazette notification of Phase 6 of Assembly elections in UP, where voting on 57 Assembly constituencies will take place on March 3rd. Congress leader Rahul Gandhi will visit Goa today, where he will interact with representatives of the tourism sector, Anganwadi workers and others. Besides, he will address meetings of workers and guide Congress candidates for the upcoming polls. Back in Parliament and the budget session of Parliament, in addition to the 0 hour and question hour in the Rajya Sabha today, further discussions on the President's address has been listed. In addition to this, 27 private bills have also been listed for introduction as well as for passing in the upper house for today. While in Lok Sabha, the ongoing discussion on the President's address will be carried forward. Besides, several private members' legislative bills have been listed in the lower house for today. Well, for more on the story, we've got our correspondent Vikas Sathi joining us this morning, who's covering Parliament for us. Vikas, good morning. Vikas, take us through this particular day that pans out. It's going to be a Friday, and how are the discussions, especially in the upper house, which begins earlier? Are we going to see a conclusion on the discussions, especially when it comes to the motion of thanks to the President's address today?
Good morning, Anil. Right, so we expect that Rajya Sabha, the discussion on motion of vote of thanks to the President's address may complete today itself. In fact, after 0 hour and question hour, from 12:30 onwards, Rajya Sabha will take up. Private members will, in between, like from 11:30 to 12:30, there will be a discussion. There will be further discussion on motion of thanks. While in the Lok Sabha, we expect that from 6:30 onwards, there will be a discussion on private members' bill, and before that, the again resume the discussion on the motion of vote of thanks, and both the houses today have private members bills, so several MPs will speak about their private bills, and that is the also very important part of the proceedings, because many of the members come up with solution for several issues in their private members bill. So most of the time has been blocked for that business, but yes, there will be a discussion in both the houses, further discussion on the motion of vote of thanks. Anil.
Also with regards to how this particular session of parliament has been, especially the upper house, we seem to be having much better coordination, especially between the government and the opposition with regards to the running of the house. How has this particular U-turn, or what you would say, how has this particular furthering of discussions and deliberation taken place, especially in the upper house in this session of parliament?
Right, and in fact, yesterday when the Rajya Sabha starts functioning, Vice President, the Chairman, in fact, thanked all the members from not only from the government side but also from the opposition MPs, and he also underlined that after these successive 4 sessions, in this session there is no disruption, and he said that because of that we can see a quality debate in the house, and almost after the 4 session and 41 sitting, the Rajya Sabha is functioning smoothly, and for that he thanked all the members, and he expected that in the coming days also the upper house will see smooth functioning, because most of the disruption we have witnessed in the past few months have been mainly in the Rajya Sabha, though it is the house of seniors, and it is expected that the Rajya Sabha functions smoothly, but again most of the disruption was witnessed by the Rajya Sabha. But yesterday even the chairman underlined this thing, that the house is functioning very well, very smoothly, and he thanked all the members for that.
Also with regards to the discussion that we have seen in both houses of parliament with regards to the motion of thanks to the president's address, what are the topics that have been deliberated both from the government as well as from many political parties across the spectrum?
From the government's perspective, most of the BJP MPs praised the policies of the government, and they said that President's address reaffirms the government's commitment to come with the policies, to bring the policies for common man, and whatever has been done in the past 1 year, that is also reflected in President's speech. So most of the BJP MPs praised the speech and praised the government's initiatives. And on the other hand, the opposition MPs, especially from those states which are which are poll bound, those MPs criticized the government on several aspects, and they said that many things were not included in the president's address, though there were serious issues of employment, of less fund allocation in education sector, and some of the members said that in the whole president's address there was no mentioning of the ongoing situation of inflation. So opposition MPs raised their issues, especially we saw the MPs from the Punjab, Uttar Pradesh raised their voices, and since these states are going to be voted in the next few weeks, so those MPs were very vocal about the local issues as well. They questioned the government policies that those welfare schemes have not reached to the grassroots levels in their constituencies. So opposition MPs took as an opportunity to raise those issues which may also be linked with the upcoming assembly elections in 4 states and 1 union territory.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you and appreciate you joining us. It's a busy day ahead. You take good care of yourself. We'll come back to you across the day for more updates from Parliament. Well, staying with that particular Parliament story, public policy and consumer rights experts have hailed the general budget presented by the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman on Tuesday. Our correspondent Nandita Dagar spoke to 2 of them, and they termed this budget far-sighted and balanced.
The leap that we are going to take in terms of road and railways, that is going to benefit everybody. The problem is we always see budget just in 2 aspects. One is the free bribes that are given, and the second is that income tax slabs. But we have to see beyond that. because today already the country is going through a very difficult phase in terms of finance and revenue. So therefore, you may not have these small things that will please, a populist budget which we say, but it is going to really transform the way Indian roads and railways are run. Taking drone to the farmers also, it's something very innovative idea of the Prime Minister, and I'm sure only he could think of this. Where, even to spray a pesticide, the farmer almost spends his whole day in a small plot of land. But today, with a lot of technology and technological innovation, drones coming, it will become much faster, the coverage will be much faster, and also the benefit will be much larger.
This will boost our economy. So this is a far-sighted budget. When our infrastructure is strong, and they will be able to sell their goods, farmers will be able to sell their goods, and government has assured a quite sufficient MSP that will go directly to their account, farmers' account.
Yes, it is a farmer-friendly budget.
This is a farmers-friendly budget.
Well, moving on, as COVID cases witness a declining trend across most states of the country, schools are fully open in 11 states, partially open mainly for higher classes in 16 states, and continue to remain closed in 9 states. Ministry of Education officials say following the extensive vaccination coverage, the ministry had in December revised the guidelines issued to state for reopening of schools. It has also prepared the guidelines or SOPs for the reopening of schools, including ensuring proper cleaning and sanitization facilities, staggered and reduced timings for different classes, and students willing to study from home with the consent of the parents may be allowed to do so. Besides, Niti Aayog member Health V.K. Paul exuded more confidence now to go in the direction of reopening schools. He added that there are 268 districts where the positivity is below 5%, and clearly these districts can move in the direction of non-COVID care and also in the direction of other economic activities as well as schools reopening. However, schools must run according to protocols, standard operating procedures, because we are still in the midst of a pandemic. The centre on Thursday said the latest evidence indicating that unlike during earlier COVID surge, surgeries including elective ones are safe and not associated with higher chances of complications or deaths in COVID-19 positive patients infected with the present Omicron variant. Citing data from AIIMS, Health Ministry Joint Secretary Love Agarwal said that patients who need surgery need not be denied it. He added that no complications during surgery and immediate post-operative period was found in the study. Also, no deaths and complications in other cases as well were noted. Love Agarwal presented this data in the context of earlier studies on mortality during surgery for COVID-19 patients held in June last year, according to which perioperative SARS-CoV-2 infection increases risk of death and pulmonary complications, and delay was recommended for symptomatic patients and for elective surgeries. India's COVID-19 vaccination coverage has crossed 168 crore 40 lakh on Thursday. Health Ministry said that over 50 lakh 11,000 vaccine doses were administered on Thursday. Over 1 crore 38 lakh precaution doses for the identified categories of beneficiaries for COVID vaccination have been administered so far. ICMR Director General Balram Bhargav urged people to come forward for vaccination. He added that data proves that vaccination has helped in the reduction of number of fatalities. Balram Bhargav further said that the requirement of mechanical ventilation was much lower among fully vaccinated people.
91% of these people who died fully vaccinated had comorbidities, and unvaccinated 83% had comorbidities, and the requirement of mechanical ventilation was also much lower, 5% versus 11% in the fully vaccinated. So this is just emphasizing the fact that vaccination helps and not having comorbidities also helps.
Meanwhile, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare rebutted media reports claiming that 50 lakh unused COVID shield doses may go waste by Fairbairn, terming them ill-informed and misleading. It added that the government and the centre is proactively advising states to abide by principles of first expiry, first out of vaccines in the COVID-19 vaccination drive. It also said that a provision of vaccine exchange has been made available on CoWIN to ensure no vaccine doses are wasted. It also refuted media reports alleging a vaccination fraud and further claiming that people are being fraudulently registered as doubly vaccinated without receiving both doses. The Health Ministry said that these reports have also alleged that the vaccination figures were being manipulated. Thus, the ministry said it is clarified that such media reports are not only misleading but are completely baseless. Meanwhile, in a tragic accident in Pune city of Maharashtra, at least 5 workers were killed and 5 others injured after a portion of an under construction building collapsed on them in Yerwada area late last night. According to Pune Traffic Police Commissioner, the construction work of a mall was underway in the Shastri Nagar area of Yerwada. A 16 mm sized iron mesh was made for laying slabs on basement parking of the building. Suddenly, this giant iron mesh fell on 10 labourers who were working at the site. All labourers belong to Bihar. The reason for the collapse is under investigation.
बिल्डिंग का काम चालू है. काम करते समय जो स्टील वर्क है, स्टील के वर्क का काम चालू था और वो कोलैप्स हो गया. तो उसमें 5 लोगों की वहाँ पे डेथ हुई है और उसमें 2 क्रिटिकल है अभी और 3 लोग हैं उनको माइनर इंजरी है. उनकी ट्रीटमेंट ससून हॉस्पिटल में चालू है.
While Prime Minister Narendra Modi has expressed grief over the Pune incident, taking to Twitter, he said, and I quote, "Pained by the mishap at an under-construction building in Pune, condolences to the bereaved families, hope that all those injured in this mishap recover at the earliest." Shifting focus, Naval Investiture ceremony to facilitate naval personnel who have demonstrated gallant acts, leadership, professional achievements and distinguished service of high order was conducted at the Veronica Auditorium, INS India, New Delhi on Thursday. Admiral R. Harikumar, Chief of Naval Staff, on behalf of the President of India, conferred the Gallantry and Distinguished Service Awards announced on Independence Day and Republic Day to the recipients. A total of 14 medals, which included 2 Nausena Medal for Gallantry, 5 Nausena Medal for Devotion to Duty, 5 Vishisht Seva Medal for Long Meritorious Service, 1 Uttam Jeevan Raksha Padak and 1 Jeevan Raksha Padak for acts of courage and self-sacrifices were awarded. In view of the prevailing pandemic, the Naval Investiture ceremony was conducted locally by each command of the Navy. The award ceremony was witnessed by a limited number of senior dignitaries of the Indian Navy, spouses and families of the awardees. Well, time now to move on to our next section where we take a look at all the stories from across the globe. Well, first up, the leader of the Islamic State died when he blew himself up and his family members during a US military raid in Syria. Abu Ibrahim al-Hashmi al-Qurayshi set off a blast, killing him and his family as special forces rounded on his hideout after a gunfight. The blowing up tactic was also used by Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi when he encountered US forces in 2019. Qurayshi had led Islamic State since the death of Baghdadi. Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden described the death of ISIS leader as an act of desperate cowardice. In brief remarks at the White House, Joe Biden said the choice to use special forces to target the ISIS leader Abu Ibrahim al-Hashmi al-Qureshi was made to minimize civilian casualties despite the greater risk to American troops. He said all Americans involved in the operation returned safely. And speaking in the Roosevelt Room at the White House, Biden said Qureshi was behind a series of atrocities, including against the Yazidi people. He said that this operation served as a warning to terrorist groups. The US raid targeted a 3-storied residential building on the outskirts of the opposition-held town of Atme, which is in northern Idlib province and close to the border with Turkey. The region is a stronghold of the jihadist groups that are fierce rivals of ISIS, as well as Turkish-backed rebel factions fighting the Syrian government. Intelligence report had established that Qureshi was living with his family on the second floor of the residential building in Atme, which he ran ISIS using couriers to dispatch his orders in Syria and elsewhere. Though the terror group announced his rise to the leadership 4 days after the al-Baghdadi death in October, Qureshi is believed to have long been groomed for the role and kept away from the battlefield in anticipation of assuming the mantle. The US had placed a $10 million reward on Qureshi when he took over as the ISIS leader. On to the next big story on the Ukraine crisis. US has accused Moscow of a plot to fabricate an attack by Ukrainian forces. The Pentagon on Thursday said that the United States has intelligence showing that Russia had a plan to fabricate a pretext for invading Ukraine. US State Department spokesperson Ned Price on Thursday said Washington has information that Russia is planning to stage fabricated attacks by Ukrainian military as a pretext to invade Ukraine. Price also said that one of the possible options is producing a propaganda video depicting the attack.
The United States has information that Russia is planning to stage fabricated attacks by Ukrainian military or intelligence forces as a pretext for a further invasion of Ukraine. One possible option the Russians are considering, and which we made public today, involves the production of a propaganda video, a video with graphic scenes of false explosions depicting corpses, crisis actors pretending to be mourners, and images of destroyed locations or military equipment, entirely fabricated by Russian intelligence. To be clear, the production of this propaganda video is one of a number of options that the Russian government is developing as a fake pretext to initiate and potentially justify military aggression against Ukraine. We don't know if Russia will necessarily use this or another option in the coming days. We are publicizing it now, however, in order to lay bare the extent of Russia's destabilizing actions towards Ukraine and to dissuade Russia from continuing this dangerous campaign.
Meanwhile, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has offered to mediate between Russia and Ukraine in the crisis. While holding talks with his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv, he said that Turkey is ready to do its part to end the crisis between the two friendly countries that it neighbors from the Black Sea. He added that he would gladly host a summit or technical discussion at the leaders' level. Also in the meeting, Tayyip Erdogan extended support to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, including Crimea. He also appreciated the prudent and dialogue-promoting messages of the Ukrainian leaders. He said that Turkey sincerely believes that the crisis will be ended by peaceful and diplomatic means within the framework of the Minsk Agreement on the basis of Ukraine's territorial integrity and international law. Turkey has good ties with Kyiv and Moscow, but has said it would do what is necessary as a NATO member if Russia invades. The leaders of France and Turkey attempted to mediate in the Ukraine crisis on Thursday as Washington announced it had evidence of a Russian plan to fake a Ukrainian attack to justify invading its neighbor. French President Emmanuel Macron had a telephonic talk on Thursday both with Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky to try and diffuse tensions. Ukraine's leader Zelensky said his discussions with Macron focused on the festering conflict in the breakaway regions of eastern Ukraine, and in a tweet, he said, continued dialogue with French counterpart Emmanuel Macron on countering security challenges and stepping up the peace process within the Normandy format. Both sides agreed on further joint steps to maintain Ukraine's stability and enhance financial and economic cooperation. Meanwhile, Putin and Macron discussed the situation in Ukraine and Moscow's proposals on security guarantees. The Kremlin in a statement said a substantive dialogue continued on the situation around Ukraine and issues related to the Russian initiative to develop long-term legal guarantees for the security of Russia. During the meeting, Putin also drew Macron's attention to Kyiv's provocative statements and actions. The leaders also exchanged views on international issues in the context of the French presidency of the Council of the European Union. NATO meanwhile said that Russia had stepped up deployments to Ukraine's northern neighbors Belarus in recent days and was expected to have 30,000 troops there for joint military exercises this month. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said over the last days, we have seen a significant movement of Russian military forces into Belarus. He said that this is the biggest Russian deployment there since the Cold War, with an expected 30,000 combat troops as well as Spetsnaz's Special Operation Forces Su-35 fighter jets, S-400 air defense systems and nuclear-capable Iskander missiles. The Russia-Belarus exercise running till Feb 20th has provided Moscow with cover to further increase forces near Ukraine. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu arrived in Belarus on Thursday to inspect Russian and Belarusian troops and was due to meet Belarusian Ambassador Alexander Lukashenko today. Meanwhile, Ukraine's defense minister has stressed that Russia had currently massed a total of 1,15,000 troops near Ukraine's borders. In some other international updates, US President Joe Biden on Thursday called for greater investment in local police departments alongside social services in a visit to New York City. His decision aimed at projecting a united front against gun violence with Mayor Eric Adams after a series of violent crimes that have rattled the city. Biden and US Attorney General Merrick Garland made the trip in the wake of the funerals of two city police officers who were fatally shot last month while responding to a 9/11 call. The police killings are part of an overall surge in gun violence in US cities, including Philadelphia and Chicago, since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic in 2020. The Indonesian government, meanwhile, is certain that it has accelerated the construction of the new capital city of Indonesia. The construction of the new capital has been planned to commence by the second semester of 2022. The country recently decided to shift its capital from Jakarta to Nusantara. The decision is an effort to relieve the huge environmental challenges facing Jakarta and to redistribute wealth. An update and a look at the COVID-19 situation worldwide. So far, over 38 crore 82 lakh cases have been reported worldwide, while the number of recoveries stand about 30 crore 70 lakh. The death toll has crossed 57 lakh 29,000. United States remains the worst hit country by the pandemic, reporting over 7 crore 71 lakh cases. Over 9 lakh 19,000 people have lost their lives due to COVID-19 in the United States of America. Shifting to Europe, where the number of infections seems to be rising. France, the first country in the European continent to cross the 2 crore mark, having over 2 crore 1 lakh cases of COVID-19, followed by United Kingdom having 1 crore 76 lakh, Russia having 1 crore 22, and Italy fourth in that particular European continent, having over 1 crore 13 lakh cases of COVID-19. Meanwhile, in Hong Kong, the government imposed an overnight lockdown for COVID-19 testing at 3 buildings in Fortune Plaza of Tai Po district. The buildings were locked down as the number of untraceable COVID-19 cases in the district reached the highest since the 5th wave of the pandemic began. The authorities have warned there could soon be an exponential rise in case numbers, and the number of untraceable cases kept smashing the city's record with a new high of 31 today. A fish stall in Hung Hoom market was also being hit by the virus, prompting an earlier closure of the wet market. It will remain closed tomorrow for cleaning. Authorities have reported quite a number of family clusters in recent days, likely due to family gatherings over the Lunar New Year holidays. Meanwhile, people in Hong Kong Sha Tin City lined up to get a COVID-19 test on Thursday after the sewage samples from various parts of the city tested positive. The authorities have mandated COVID-19 tests for people who had been in multiple housing blocks and premises around the East Rail Sha Tin station during specific periods. Hong Kong has been in the grip of a fifth wave of COVID-19, and the country has more than 14,000 cases of COVID-19 with fatalities crossing 210. In Thailand, the Center for COVID-19 Situation Administration has warned of a possible surge in infections in the next 2 weeks due to Chinese New Year. The country has been reporting high number of infections related to marketplaces in Bangkok and 20 other provinces. The administration has also urged governors of provinces with clusters to ensure that all markets strictly comply with the health department's universal preventive measures. The CCSA also unveiled guidelines for dealing with infections in schools. Under the new guidelines, only classrooms will be closed if only 1 or 2 students are found to be infected. The school can remain open for the rest of the students. Thailand has been witnessing a rise in COVID-19 cases with daily infections fluctuating between 6,000 to 9,000. The country has more than 24,65,000 cases of COVID-19 with fatalities crossing 22,200. Indonesia's Bogor city administration has decided to halt face-to-face learning in schools in view of the rising number of COVID-19 cases found in schools. The country has been witnessing tremendous surge in the number of COVID-19 cases reported in schools. Meanwhile, COVID-19 pandemic in Jakarta, Bogor, Depok, Tangerang and Bekasi, Jabodetabek area is worsening. The bed occupancy in hospitals of Jakarta has reached 60%, and Indonesia has more than 44,14,000 cases of the disease, while it lost over 1,44,000 lives due to COVID-19 so far. South Africa's African biologists have used the publicly available sequence of Moderna Inc.'s mRNA COVID-19 vaccine to make its own version of the shot. The new vaccine could be tested in humans before the end of this year, and the vaccine candidate would be the first to made based on a widely used vaccine without the assistance and approval of the developer. In a first mRNA vaccine designed, developed and produced at lab scale on the African continent, the World Health Organization last year picked a consortium including African for a pilot project to give poor and middle-income countries the know-how how to make COVID vaccines. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said that the government will not use troops against truckers whose nearly week-long protest of vaccine mandate has brought traffic in Central Quarter to a halt. Trudeau said that his government had received no formal request for military assistance to remove this core group of protesters who have been camped out in and around Parliament. Trudeau had told the protesters to go home, a sentiment echoed by city officials. He, however, has refused to meet the truckers. More than 200 trucks and other vehicles have been blockading downtown roads in the nation's capital since last Friday in what is an unprecedented protest by Canadian standards. Organizers say drivers plan to hold similar protests in Toronto, the country's most populous city and its financial hub, and Quebec City during weekend amid growing frustration over almost 2 years of restrictions imposed to fight COVID-19. Meanwhile, Ottawa residents have expressed frustration over the demonstrations, complaining of constant noise and impact on local businesses and public services and unruly and aggressive behavior. Police have began ticketing protesters, writing 30 traffic tickets for infractions like excessive noise, for horn honking and disobeying street signs. Well, let's now move on to our next segment where we get you the latest from the news trending in our segment, Web News Review. Well, I've got my colleague Preeti standing by. Good morning, Preeti. Over to you.
Good morning, Anil, and a warm morning to our viewers as well. When we talk of the social media platforms, and most of the papers are talking the COVID situation, I'll get you. We've in fact also got the details in to our viewers also in our bulletin before that. In the bulletin before that, in fact, this is the slide coming in from Mint, the article which I picked up in the morning. It says schools can reopen if, and it has put forth the guidelines, and check centers new guidelines as COVID cases decline. Now, this is a breather coming in right in the morning, wherein the schools have decided to, some schools in fact can reopen, and the Education Ministry has put the onus on the state governments to decide whether the schools need to be open and to function in full or not. Also, the paper says the pandemic situation has improved. There are states and districts of concern, but there is an overall contraction in the number of cases that has been witnessed, and which means that the situation is improving, and there are 268 districts where the positivity rate is below 5%. So the condition for the schools to reopen in a district is that the positivity rate in the district should be below 5%, and then the schools can reopen. Also, the paper further tells that the guidelines have been issued by the Department of School Education and Literacy, and that also suggests preparing bridge courses and implementing them in classrooms so that children do not miss on to anything related to their course. Also, the paper says that schools are completely open in 11 states, while they are reopened for mostly higher classes in 16 states, and schools shall continue to remain completely closed in 9 states. So this is how the education scenario would be evolving in the next few days when we talk of the COVID situation. The next screen up, the next slide up your screens is coming in from Hindustan Times. Yellow alert for heavy snowfall in Himachal Pradesh. Extreme cold conditions in the next 48 hours. This is what the IMD has predicted. The paper also talks of the whole of the month of February, which will be cold as put by the IMD, and Punjab and Haryana are expected to get above normal rainfall. Also, the paper further says that this week the La Nina conditions are currently prevailing over the equatorial Pacific region, which means that it is associated with harsh winter conditions. And also the paper gives us the details that this time around the IMD has adopted a new strategy for issuing monthly and seasonal outlooks for rainfall and snowfall, and also temperature, overall temperature across the country. And this new strategy is based on the newly developed multi-model ensemble based forecasting system. And with that, the next screen, the slide up your screens is coming in from the from India Today. In fact, it says IS chief blows himself up during US raid in Syria, and that has been confirmed by US President Joe Biden. In a statement by the White House, it says the US Special Forces carried out a nighttime airborne raid in northwestern Syria, during which the head of Islamic State blew himself and his family members. And also, the paper says that it carries the details of the terrorists. It says that Abu Ibrahim al-Hashmi al-Quraishi, the leader of IS, blew himself up along with his family members. This operation was carried out against the high-value jihadist targets in Idlib area in recent months, and this area specifically is active, and it is housed to many jihadists, and also it also tells that the last enclave to actively oppose the government of Bashar al-Assad. Idlib is now home to more than 3 million jihadists and is dominated by them. With that, I'll bring forth the next article, which I picked up from the Hindu. It says Chandrayaan 3 set for August launch. It is a follow-up follow-up of Chandrayaan-2 in July 2019, which aimed to land a rover on the lunar South Pole. And the paper spells out the details. It says India plans to execute Chandrayaan-3 mission in August. This has been confirmed by Minister Jitendra Singh, and also he confirmed that in Lok Sabha yesterday. And the government has stated that though this mission was scheduled in this year, that is 2022, but this is the first time that a specific month has been announced. The ISRO has planned 19 missions through this year until December, and consisting of 8 launch vehicle missions, 7 spacecraft missions, and also 4 technology demonstrator missions. Just a quick backgrounder, Chandrayaan-3 mission is the follow-up of Chandrayaan-2 that took place in in July 2019, and also it was aimed to send a rover and in the South Lunar Pole, and also it was aboard GSLV Mk3. Now, the lander Vikram along with Chandrayaan-2, instead of controlled landing, ended up crash landing on September 7, 2019, and prevented rover Pragyan from successfully traveling on the surface of Moon. So that's it when we talk of the web news review this morning, Anil. It's back to you for the rest of breakfast news.
Well, thank you, Preeti, for that quick update and that lowdown, especially when it comes to the Chandrayaan-3 mission there. Thank you and appreciate you joining us. Let's now move on to our next segment, Sports Track. Well, Egypt team has reached the final of the football tournament Africa Cup of Nations. Egypt beat Cameroon 3-1 on penalties, ending the host's hope of glory on home soil. Thursday's second semi-final finished goalless after 120 minutes, but it was Egypt who prevailed in the shootout, just as they had in the last 16 against Ivory Coast. Egypt will now face Senegal on Sunday in the final. Well, Atletico Bilbao's team have reached the semi-finals of Copa del Rey. The team defeated Real Madrid 1-0 in this match. The defeat means Real Madrid won't be able to add the Copa to last month's Super Copa triumph, but they remain in the hunt for more trophies. Carlo Ancelotti denied that that Real Madrid's Copa del Rey exit could derail their season after Atletico Club's 1-0 quarter-final win at San Mamés on Thursday night. Alex Bagua's 89-minute strike was enough to put Atletico Bilbao into the tournament's last 4, joining Rayo Vallecano, Valencia and Real Betis in Friday's semi-final draw. England cricket team's head coach Chris Silverwood has followed Director of Cricket Ashley Giles in leaving the men's cricket team following the heavy Ashes defeat. The 4-0 loss to Australia came as part of a wider run that has seen England win only one of their past 14 tests. Silverwood was appointed in 2019 by Giles, who stood down on Wednesday. Andrew Strauss has temporarily taken over from Giles and will appoint an interim coach for the tour of West Indies in March. A squad for the 3-test series is due to be named next week. India's tennis stars Sania Mirza, Rohan Bopanna, Ankita Raina and Ramkumar Ramanathan were on Thursday included in the core group of athletes under the Sports Ministry's target Olympic podium scheme till the Asian Games later this year. The decision to include the quartet for support under tops was taken at a meeting of the Sports Ministry's Mission Olympic Cell after receiving a request from the All India Tennis Association. Well, it's time now to take a jog down memory lane and take a look at all the important events that took place on this very day in history. Well, India's glorious freedom struggle is one of the greatest struggles the modern world has ever witnessed. DD India brings you a glimpse of the struggle every day. Exactly 100 years ago, on the 4th of Feb 1922, the Chauri Chaura incident took place. Apart from this, today we are also talking about the nationalist leader M.A. Iyengar, who's also remembered. Let's take a look.
Exactly 100 years ago, on the 4th of February 1922, the Chauri Chaura incident took place. Gandhiji had launched the non-cooperation movement on the 1st of August 1920. As the movement gathered momentum over the next year and a half, a large number of volunteers became active across the country. In January 1922, the Gorakhpur Congress Committee and the Khilafat Committee urged peasants to lead the picketing of shops selling foreign items. The police cracked down on volunteers and severely beat up some peasants. This incident infuriated the local people. On February the 4th, people assembled in the town of Chauri Chaura and proceeded to picket the Mundera Bazaar, which was close to the Chauri Chaura police station. When the police opened up fire, a volcano of anger erupted amongst the protesters.
Protesters came down heavily on the police. The crowd set the police station on fire. 23 police personnel died and a lot of police property was destroyed. Mahatma Gandhi was shocked by the incident and he decided to halt the non-cooperation movement, which was finally stopped on 12 February 1922.
More than 200 protesters were put up on trial by the British administration for the Chauri Chaura incident, and 6 of them died in police custody. After an 8-month-long trial, 172 people were sentenced to death. This verdict met severe backlash, after which the Allahabad High Court revised its judgment and sentenced 19 to death, 110 to life imprisonment, and the remaining received long jail terms. Today, a Shaheed Smarak stands at the site in honor of those martyrs. Salutes the brave sons of the soil.
We also remember the nationalist leader M.A. Iyengar, Madhabushi Anantasayanam Iyengar, who was born on 4th February 1891 at Tiruchanur near the spiritual town of Tirupati.
Srinivasa Govinda Sri Venkatesha Govinda Bhaktavatsala Govinda Bhagavata Priya Govinda.
Iyengar was drawn into the freedom movement at a very early age. Within his home state, he was one of the leading figures of the Indian National Congress. Responding to Gandhiji's call for non-cooperation, Iyengar suspended his legal practice during 1921 and 22.
Between 1940 and 1944, Iyengar was imprisoned for nearly 3 years. First, for taking part in the individual Satyagraha campaign, and later in the Quit India movement.
When G.V. Mavlankar was chosen as the Speaker of the Constituent Assembly for legislative functions, Iyengar was chosen to be its Deputy Speaker. Thus, when the first Lok Sabha was constituted in 1952, Iyengar was the unanimous choice to be its Deputy Speaker. After the sudden demise of G.V. Mavlankar, Iyengar was elected unanimously to preside over the Lok Sabha on 8th of March 1956.
During his brief tenure as the Speaker of the first Lok Sabha, Iyengar proved himself a worthy inheritor of the high traditions in the parliamentary life. Iyengar was thus the unanimous choice of the House to be its Speaker in the second and third Lok Sabha also. In 1962, he resigned from the post of Speaker to serve as the Governor of Bihar.
Iyengar also remained active socially in the field of education. Iyengar breathed his last on 19th March 1978, pays tribute to the great leader.
Well, time now to take a look at the weather in your city. Well, the western disturbance lying as a cyclonic circulation there clearly over northern India, and an induced low pressure area lying across northwest Rajasthan and neighborhood, and associated cyclone atmosphere and circulation in lower tropospheric levels. What it means is that fairly widespread to widespread moderate light rainfall along with snowfall continuing over the western Himalayan region. Isolated hailstorm very likely over Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand today. Isolated heavy rainfall, snowfall likely over Jammu, Kashmir, Ladakh, Gilgit, Baltistan, Muzaffarabad, Himachal Pradesh, also Uttarakhand. Light moderate rainfall likely over Punjab, Haryana, Chandigarh, Delhi, Uttar Pradesh today, and isolated heavy rainfall very likely over Punjab, Haryana and Chandigarh. Let's now take a look at temperatures in your city. Well, that's all we have time for in this edition of News. Thanks for watching. We leave you with a wonderful image to make you smile. And today's glimpses are of a dog show organized by the BSFs in Odisha's Koraput district. Take a look at them. Enjoy. Have a safe and wonderful day ahead. Bye-bye.